Greetings from the good forest. We've looked so far at the Eusylvanian quadrants of nature, companionship, and heritage. The fourth and last quadrant, covered here, is also the most elusive, the quadrant of mystery, which encompasses the narratives by which we can come to understand the other three. Indeed, it speaks to the ways in which we can understand reality itself. A mystery, thinking etymologically, connotes a secret or hidden meaning. It derives from mysterium, a secret rite or form of worship, more distantly suggesting the perspective of those who have been initiated into a particular mystery tradition. There's a certain demarcation here of the sacred, of that which is set apart, kept whole, preserved, not to be violated or transgressed. We can see mystery as representing more generally our worldview, or Weltanschauung, as exercised through a set of life practices, sometimes considered religious and sometimes not. The trees of this forest, of this fourth realm of mystery, comprise the ideas, notions, and spirits of our cosmos, whether encountered in various abstract forms or in more traditional garb. Our understanding of the cosmos, our worldview, has of course changed over time, proceeding in conjunction with changes to our understanding of nature, society, and history. The cosmos implies an order or arrangement, one by means of which we make sense of the world. It's interesting to think of the word cosmetic as a cognate of cosmos, one that refers to the arranging or ordering of the human person. In a sense, when we are confronting the cosmos, we are actively dressing and arranging it, using the instruments, insights, and inspirations that are accessible to us, and that accord with our judgments and perceptions. It is a simplification, to be sure, but we can think, in light of Europe's past, on three major paradigms or patterns of understanding the real, each with numerous variations and forms. These include, first of all, a pre-Christian heathen or pagan worldview, when many peoples of Europe dwelled, as it were, on the heath, on open, uncultivated land, living in relatively close contact with the natural patterns of the earth. This is a view marked by polytheisms of different sorts, sometimes accompanied by a high level of philosophical inquiry and technological prowess. Second, there is the cosmos that emerged in the shadow of Rome, spreading widely in that state's decline, one guided, of course, by the gospel, or good word of Christ. Constituting one of the many Near Eastern mystery religions of its day, this Christian cosmos imparted upon its believers an avowedly monotheistic view, one that unfolded over centuries, and that eventually came to a Trinitarian understanding of the Godhead, later finding a synthesis with Greek philosophical thought. With the transition to Christianity, one could say in effect that God had moved indoors, a change reflecting perhaps an increased mastery over nature, but also a growing feeling of alienation from the various patterns of the earth. A people of the heath, of the countryside, became a people of the book, their increasing literacy, urbanization, and scientific understanding, leading over generations to greater forms of estrangement from nature's rhythms. There is thus, with the burgeoning and blossoming of Christianity, an apparent loss of mystery as related to the nature realm, a loss that is perhaps balanced by other civilizational gains. We can think, with the eclipsing of various polytheistic faiths by Christianity, on the increasing social complexity that was enabled through a shift to a universal faith, instituted through an emphasis on standardized texts and rituals. A change, one could argue, that gave rise to recognizable conceptions of Europe, seen as a whole. Christianity is often credited with a greater taming of human impulses, which is said to have allowed for the creation of a richer civilization, as reflected in the arts, in literature, and in novel forms of civic structure and practice. The Christian perspective appears to have laid the groundwork for what we can designate as the third Enlightenment view of the cosmos, one that, seen generally, de-emphasizes and later expunges questions of reputed metaphysical import through its embrace of secular or worldly investigations and narratives. Over the past few centuries, an increased rationalization of history, including the history of biblical doctrine, together with comparative religious findings and the fruits of scientific research, have significantly destabilized Christian worldviews. Despite its former dominance, Christianity today is typically regarded, at least with respect to Europe, as embodying a largely spent religio-cultural force, to be recognized historically, if it is recognized at all. It may be said that pagan beliefs, from a more modern standpoint, are often seen as something naive or childlike at best, defined for instance as constituting a set of erstwhile explanations of natural phenomena before the establishment of scientific discourse. The Enlightenment worldview is one that in many ways still reigns today. It's a view that has facilitated the changes discussed in previous presentations concerning our interactions with nature and our structuring of society. It has altered Western conceptions of history as well, shifting identity formations to that which is definable solely in secular terms, excluding experiences of self and world that fall beyond an accepted science-defined paradigm. Such a turn in the cosmos to what has amounted over centuries to a perspective of greater and greater abstraction has held, of course, countless benefits, awakening us to patterns in the universe that were previously out of reach. We can think here on the oft-cited and celebrated liberation from dogma that stood as an obstacle in the way of certain scientific methods, the development of which have no doubt led to various improvements and enrichments of the human condition, as realized through various feats in engineering and medicine. By putting faith in ourselves, particularly in a prized faculty of reason, we could reach unprecedented levels of worldly comprehension, leaving notions of some other world aside. This cosmic shift, however, has also cast shadows, sowing new seeds of disorientation, disenchantment, and unrest. We can see, for example, a widespread acceptance of relatively recent scientific theories concerning nature and humanity, from the Big Bang to evolution, but with relatively little understanding of what greater meaning might be generated from them. In this way, such findings hardly seem processed by modern peoples, let alone enfolded into some kind of edifying activity or outlook. Through the modern period, scientific investigations of the very large have led us to feel alone in the universe. Investigations of the very small have unseated previous truth claims about a clockwork cosmos, one that is knowable and capable of being mastered. Research into biological inheritance has led us to see humanity as just another species, to live and die as but one of many earthly life forms. For many, we appear to be advanced apes on an isolated planet, technologically proficient, but always on the brink of one disaster or another, with no purpose beyond what we can see and touch, in charge of ourselves perhaps, but also distressingly free. In a cosmos governed by reason and by the values of modern science, the world is full of questions, but seems strangely devoid of mystery and inherent meaning. Such a world, for many, appears flat and disenchanted, uninspired and unpurposed. It's a world in which wide swaths of the population have lost heart, laying them open to various kinds of manipulation, exploitation, and debasement. We might consider that the mystery realm is in fact connected to a sense of purpose. Purpose derives from the elements per and pos. It's what one puts forth onward in time place, or order. It thus concerns where you're going, what moves you, what you place in front of you. Does your life have meaning, you might ask? And if so, of what sort? The answers you give in the mystery realm will of course affect your actions and viewpoints in the quadrants already discussed. In a subjectively felt alienation from the cosmos, we may concede to a certain understanding of a universal order, but fail to see the purpose or direction in it, seeing instead perhaps that it has no purpose, or that it contains purposes that are somehow beneath us. Such a cosmic rift or rupture may be understood as linked to previously highlighted forms of disconnection. Considering nature, for example, one could say that we live lives, especially as seen in a post-pagan context, of greater disconnection from the wilds of the earth, unsure as a collective of how even to approach nature outside of its most tame manifestations. Considering companionship, one could argue that the societal developments that have accompanied the shift to a post-Christian worldview have also caused a new kind of alienation in once tightly bound communities, which increasingly have become unable to unite under one God and in one house of worship. We might come to the view, then, that paradigms have trade-offs, that there is no worldview that is not without apparent downsides, even as one may celebrate its upsides. It might also be surmised that paradigms are not easily displaced, being at least partly dependent upon what we can know and gather from the world around us. In many respects, there appears to be a ratcheting effect that disallows a return to previous forms of understanding, because they seem to inadequately take account of insights more recently gained. We can perhaps see this sort of ratcheting progression even in the life of a single individual, with new knowledge and experience leading for that person to a shift that prevents him from returning to a previous life phase. Such progressions notwithstanding, it seems mistaken to believe that perspectives arrived at later in the history of an individual, or of a people, are necessarily superior in nature, although they may be judged as more advanced with respect to certain qualities or criteria. Often there are lessons to learn from previous life phases that, if incorporated into one's present view, could lead to an enhancement and enrichment of one's disposition and outlook. There will always be the question of how to individually and collectively cope, and indeed thrive, given the inherent uncertainties of life. Uncertainties in our social dealings, for example, and in our understanding of life itself. Worldviews have ways of creating buffer zones that are capable of providing insulation from such uncertainties. In a positive sense, the worldview that we grasp, and that grasps us, is that which we put our trust in, that which centers and stabilizes us in space and time. Recognized religious worldviews hold perhaps special benefits that are often lacking in secular perspectives. Regular religious practice allows, for instance, connection with others beyond the commercial sphere, potentially opening up a connection to the wider natural world as well. In its many traditional guises, religious practice often supports the formation of families, as well as the generation and maintenance of communities, in ways both practical and abstract. Today, however, such religious perspectives are typically marginalized and ignored. Individuals bereft of such a cosmos must find, then, secular ways of coping with the universe in which they feel existentially estranged, seeking out goods and services with the hope of shielding themselves from the trials and tribulations of life. Just to consider some basic examples, we may think here on the ways in which food, alcohol, and drugs may be used and abused, on acquisitiveness and various markers of affluence and status, and on different kinds of screen technologies and programming that are employed as methods of amusement and escape. These are ways of indemnifying against, or at the very least providing distraction from, the anxieties and hardships of life, its stresses and strains. If left unchecked, a felt alienation in the mystery realm can lead for the individual to a life-draining ennui, to a bankruptcy of hope, to a poverty of will, and a greater solitude than what might otherwise be encountered, all of which may be claimed as part and parcel of the modern condition, and as informing a particularly Western malaise. An estrangement in the mystery realm, however, may not be recognized as such. Indeed, it may not be recognized at all, but rather experienced or expressed as a kind of implicit disappointment, a pervasive but unspoken weariness in looking upon life's offerings. In such a state, nihilism can take hold, hedonism can flourish, and, in the absence of cosmic mysteries, other phenomena may become strangely enchanted. Concepts of government and economy, for instance, as seen in various idealizations of the social order, or materiality itself, as through the manifestation of assorted matter-based creeds. Arguably, these are ways of masking a loss of cosmic meaning, of sacred purpose. Such enchantments can drive our economies and animate our politics, all without addressing a more fundamental absence or void, a cosmic chaos, a broken word. From a certain perspective, we can see in the modern Western world a loss of religiosity, especially in its traditional guises. From another perspective, however, religion can be seen to persist, albeit in more secular forms. The word God points etymologically to that which is invoked, suggesting as well the pouring of a libation, with reference to a kind of offering or sacrifice. The two readings are, in a way, complementary, for the supposed invocation can be thought to involve the sacrifice of some lower process or being. The sacrifice and invocation, the calling in of something, may entail, moreover, a move for some purpose into a recognizably higher dimension of experience. One can in fact sacrifice for entities that may not fittingly be described as metaphysical, but that can still be characterized as transcendental, an ideal perhaps that rises above and beyond the individual or group, and that is striven for and continuously envisioned by those who uphold it. The practice of this can indeed be called religion, in the sense that it addresses the sense of right or moral obligation that is suggested by that word. A relatively deep etymology of religion shows perhaps relegare at its root, meaning to bind fast or to moor. Here then it can be interpreted as what we tie ourselves to, a meaning that's certainly reflected in the more immediate derivation of religion from religio, denoting that which we show reverence and respect for, as revealed in our sacred rites and forms of worship. It is that to which we are bound or obliged. In this sense, we do indeed have religious practices today, but they don't seem to be serving in the ways that they should. Witness, as mentioned, the bond to materiality and to worldly power. Also to social ideals of various sorts, as those reputed to have emerged from the French Revolution. The qualities, namely, of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Values that have found expression, respectively, in the statist outlooks of liberalism, communism, and fascism. It can be argued that such outlooks stand not just as actionable social models or useful hypotheses, but as entities that in effect call for our allegiance, that ask for our obeisance. Indeed, there are gods here, as well as attendant forms of worship that are worthy of being seen as such. Worship in its origin, in fact, suggests the worthy. It's the condition of being honorable or deserving of reverence. Worship entails what, in a deep sense, has worth for a person, what can and should be dignified or distinguished through one's attention to it. There is perhaps a deity, god form, or ideal that we can regard as being even more fundamental to the modern outlook than those already named. One that entails the belief in reason itself as something transcendent and sacrosanct. A deity, one may note, is something etymologically that can, in a word, shine for us as something supreme. To be sure, reason has been cultivated in the West as something to which we should attach ourselves, even more as something that we should consider worthy and welcoming of our worship, secular as it may be in its expressions. We can see a kind of myth of science-based truth that has emerged from our special historical regard for reason as an ideal to uphold. It's a myth in which we've mirrored ourselves as arbiters of the real. A questioning of such truth with a capital T need not mean the negation of our insights into various natural patterns that, with the help of scientific instruments, may be observed all around us. It does mean, however, one's coming to an awareness of the religious nature of this exaltation of reason-based truth. It's a brand of religious consciousness that happens not to think of itself as such. This rationally minded religiosity, unknowingly or not, has expressed itself darkly in the ways in which we've approached the world and ordered our notions of the good. We've developed a modern prejudice against anything that can't be instrumentalized. We've become, one could say, quantity bigots, measurement Puritans, disbelievers in anything that can't be harnessed by our mechanisms or machines. In modern times, the Western way has largely been one of objectifying our relationships with nature, with each other, and with the cosmos itself. We can see this objectification process play out in our various theoretical and applied sciences, from natural sciences like physics, chemistry, and biology, to social sciences like psychology, sociology, and economics. There are many methodological benefits in adopting this sort of viewpoint, but as a cosmology, as a way of ordering our understanding of the real, it has its limits. Here, we should, as it were, objectify our very tendency to objectify, seeing it as just one of many processes of which we're capable, in the interest of situating it within a wider mystery, a greater secret in which we are held and sustained. We should, moreover, reflect on rationality itself as a worshipped ideal. Excessive attention to this God form can lead to a number of unwelcome results, and not just in the realm of mystery. We can think also of the ill effects of hyper-rationality that manifest in the realms of nature, companionship, and heritage. A Eusylvanian outlook seeks not the abolition of this presiding being or deity, far from it, but rather a tempering of this reason worship, with attention paid to other valued faculties, processes, and sources of meaning. We can value the fruits of our various so-called scientific methods, without consigning ourselves to a kind of metaphysical scientism. We understand that there is a systems method of thinking that informs our very perception of the cosmos, the order that we apprehend being at least partly contingent upon our natural, social, and historical habitats, or frames of reference. There is a strange and unavoidable localism wrapped up in the very contemplation and modeling of the cosmos, whether we are speaking as an individual, a people, or indeed as a species. The forms and forces that we experience locally in the nature, companionship, and heritage realms are sure to have an impact upon the mystery or worldview that we come to, just as an embraced mystery affects in some measure our dealings in those other three realms. Put one way, we could say that the cosmos is never just fact-derived, but also value-derived, and there we face certain questions. What is our worship? What is our rite? What is our secret? What is secretus, set apart, distinguished? We should continue to synthesize what we've come to know and understand in our ongoing apprehension of the cosmos, being mindful in the production of a life-promoting logos or word, of our own roles in forming the real, in realizing the forms of reality itself. We should furthermore question models of the universe that have in effect denatured and sterilized our worldview, developing instead means by which to regularly exercise awe in the phenomenal world, opening ourselves up in this way to the mysteries all around us. The universe, after all, may show us only what we're ready to perceive. As in the other quadrants, there is humility here, one that we hold in view of a reality that can never be fathomed once and for all. It's a humility speaking to a strange sort of humus, foundation, or ground. We're confiding in a darkness, hallowing a hollow, trusting in a realm never fully unveiled. We see the virtue in affirming the mystery before us, intending a secret that can grant us new life, a secret if nurtured that can make our lives whole. Just as there are external uncertainties that we must grapple with in nature and society, so there are uncertainties present in our own inner lives, in the vicissitudes of inner space. Such uncertainties will always be present. We can approach them as puzzles to solve, but only partially so, and with limited results. In a more encompassing way, these uncertainties speak to a greater mysterium, a means of engaging life's happenings that moves beyond everyday forms of reasoning and apprehension. A Eusylvanian way, then, in a very general sense, commends us to recognize and engage with the mysteries of what can be termed society, our social collective seen over space and time, also with the mysteries of self, of our own interior domains, and finally with the mysteries of world, that macrocosm undergirding the various forms and flows of reality itself. This Eusylvanian approach, moreover, invites us to the histories of our mysteries, as made manifest through the cosmic chapters, if you will, of the West, of the European story seen over the long term. We've talked previously of the need for embeddedness of one form or another, as pertaining to nature or community. Here we'd like to highlight the need for embedding ourselves in Western worldviews. We aim to feel our way into and investigate anew the tenets, rituals, and devotions of what we may identify as our pagan, Christian, and Enlightenment pasts, seeking to draw on the strengths of each while leaving behind discordant practices and exanimate beliefs. It's for us to sift through that motley, rich heritage of worldviews. We seek, one could say, a timely mode of enchantment, a means of engagement that calls forth the new while harking back to the old, one that is bold in its faith, unafraid of reaching across traditions to form a new religio, a new bond, a new sort of reverence. Such a revisioning may help in bringing new life to our histories, our communities, and ourselves. It takes courage to kneel before the unknown, before the mysteries upon us, but we see wisdom in this path, goodness, virtue. You can start by listening for and building on what inspires, on what inflames, developing the faculty of spirit in the process. Eusylvanus calls us to a nature, to a community, to a history. He invites us to a mystery. He asks us to step into a dark wood, into a forest for the good. Let's walk this path, Let's mind this trail. Much awaits to be discovered there. Much awaits to be disclosed. Welcome to the good forest. Welcome to Eusylvania.